All right, everyone. Welcome to Unscrewed, episode 5. We made it to 5, Truman. I'm Carlin Borisenko. You can find me at kv.locals.com and also on YouTube and Twitter and all that good stuff. And I'm here today with Truman for the 5th time. Truman, where can people find you?
For the 5th time?
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter at My Mundane Minds, returntoreason.locals.com, and Return to Reason on YouTube, all the places. Return to Reason on all the places.
And Unscrewed is basically a podcast where Truman and I, as two disaffected but red-pilled lefties, former lefties, I should say, basically talk about how we think the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and we try to find different ways to fix it, or at least cope with the world destructing around us in, this. I feel this is a very productive way to cope, Truman. How about you?
Dude, I've felt so. I mean, like, it's not just that, it's also talking about ways that, that we are trying to practically address this stuff. I mean, for people haven't seen our past conversations, which I think have been a lot of fun. And for example, the last conversation was all about libertarian movement and the liberty movement, as Dave Smith likes to call it, and the Mises Caucus within that, and just like the practical solutions around politics to the degree that politics offers us solutions, but it's not zero. And so, yeah, we're not just trying to have a coping, bitch session. We're also trying to figure this stuff out practically. So, but yeah, that's what we're doing here. It's been a while. I feel like what you're saying before we got started. Yeah, it's been a minute since we last talked, and 2, there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on. So before we recorded, we're like, why don't we just kind of catch up and see what's on our respective minds from the last few weeks, and kind of see where that takes us. I've got a few thoughts and stuff I want to tell you about, but yeah, I want to hear what you've been thinking about. How are you generally?
I really feel like I go through fits and starts with it, because I feel like the world is getting more and more and more and more and more dystopian. And maybe it's just like, so I had this stupid thing happen where I got a second strike on my YouTube channel for covering an article that was in The Hill that talked about the University of Virginia disenrolling unvaccinated students. And I got a strike on my channel for this after YouTube had already manually reviewed it and had given it approval and monetization. And I was just like, come on, this is just screwed up on several levels. And it just became, I think, I think that we can know things theoretically, and then like once we actually experience the ramifications of those things, it's knowing it on a whole deeper level. So it's not as though I didn't understand that there were like stupid tech censorship issues and things. Of course I did. But you know what it really illustrated to me, Truman, was when Dave Rubin was talking about the need to create these smaller communities around like-minded people, I don't know that I was 100% bought into his vision for the need of that. Now, that's not to say I don't appreciate locals. Of course, we're both on locals, and I appreciate I joined locals because I trusted that Dave was never going to censor it or do anything nefarious. I trusted his vision, but I didn't necessarily agree that I thought that the future was going to be these little kind of communities of like-minded people. Well, I got to tell you, I've completely gone 180 on that. And now I'm like, This is the only future that makes sense. Like these insulated communities that are going to, and what really did it for me was that I had a community Zoom in my locals either last week or this week after I got that strike. And we were talking about ivermectin, and just, whether or not people what's going on with it, whether or not people think it's effective. I might post this on YouTube, so I can't even say either way. Check with the CDC. But I
trust the science.
Trust the science.
So I will say the official position of Unscrewed is trust the science. So
trust the science. Talk to your doctor. We were in this community Zoom talking about ivermectin, and I had this kind of just a realization that the conversation that we were having in the community Zoom, I couldn't have that conversation on Facebook, I couldn't have it on Twitter, and I couldn't have it on YouTube without being censored. And it's not like there was anything nefarious about this conversation. It was just people saying, here's what I think, here's what I've read, here are some things I'm thinking about. There was no evil kind of ivermectin is the best thing ever for reason X, Y, B, and Z, and here's the evil suppression of the, like, there was nothing like that. It was just human beings talking. But it was about a subject that we would literally not be able to have the conversation on any of the big tech platforms without it being censored for medical misinformation. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? Ruben was right. He was right. And I'm more grateful for locals than I have ever been in my life.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's also, one of the things that, if I remember right, that brought you locals, which I know I remember it right, because you on Twitter, you said you were going to start a Facebook community.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I mentioned this before, but I said you should just go to locals because the Facebook ain't going to work.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is what I'm trying for now. I remember you did reply. You're like, this is what I'm trying for now. I'm like, all right, well, I'll see how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think locals is probably where you're going to land. And so you did try big tech even then to build a community, and it didn't work because it can't work.
Well, it's not that it didn't work. That group actually still exists on Facebook. The problem is that I can't go on Facebook because every time I go on Facebook, I get like a ban for something stupid. I literally got
That's
banned.
What I mean. It can't work. It didn't work because it can't work. It can't work by work. I mean, you can't have a free and open conversation in that space.
No, you can't. Truman, I literally got a 4-day suspension on Facebook for quoting the New York Times. Like it is so ridiculous. And so the group actually does still exist, but we were getting even in the early stages of that group, we were getting just like all these content warnings and Facebook removing stuff without even telling us what was wrong. And so I was kind of starting to freak out one time, and I was tweeting about it, and Ruben responded to me. He's like, you need to get on locals. And I was like, oh, you're right. He's right. You were right. He was right. And thank God for locals.
So let's talk about that. There's two things there that I think are worth digging into. One, do you want to talk about tech or the competing institutions thing? Because those are probably two separate conversations. But they're both fun.
Let's talk. I mean, either way you want to go.
Well, let's keep with the tech thing, and then we can transition. So, I mean, you had that experience with YouTube. You're not the only ones who have had that, right? I think Crowder got demonetized a couple of years ago. Brett and Heather Weinstein, the Dark Horse channel and their Clips channel has been demonetized. They said that was like over half of, I think they actually, if I remember right, said 60% ish of their income for their family was from that, and that got demonetized. If I'm wrong, people can fact check me, but I know it was over half.
Yeah.
And Dave has stuff demonetized and taken, and it's always like as an error. And these places are not and let's talk about even just the wedding of big tech and the generation of consensus and information and what is truth, right? The manufacturing of truth, or manufacturing of consent, as Noam Chomsky would say, is the way that tech like elevates certain news or certain information as what is true. I mean, look what happened with the Rolling Stone thing. Did you follow that the other day? What happened with this Rolling Stone article?
It has basically been totally debunked. Something about I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's totally debunked.
So the Rolling Stone has this article out for days based on this one doctor who told them a story about how the emergency rooms were so full of people that had been overdosing on ivermectin that they had to turn away gunshot victims. And they had a picture actually of people in line to get vaccinated as the picture for this article. And they didn't verify the story at all. And you have like people like Rachel Maddow, all these other like news, like legitimate, supposedly credentialed news entities picking up the Rolling Stone thing and parroting it and doing pieces on it and quoting it and spreading this story. And then the hospital issues a statement because no one reached out to them. And the hospital issues a statement that says, this doctor hasn't worked for us for 2 months. We have not had a single person in here for anything related to ivermectin. We haven't had to turn anyone away for any reason from the emergency room. The story is entirely fallacious. And then it takes Rolling Stone at least a day. I think it was a couple days. Right. And they didn't even issue a retraction. Today they issued an update. The update of the story is that it's false. It's like, wow. But you still have the story in the update. You know what I mean? And so, but that stuff they can continue to do that because no one holds them accountable. Glenn Greenwald had a great Twitter thread about this just today. And what's funny is that I quoted Glenn in a Twitter thread also, and then I didn't realize his was a thread. And I had quoted Matt Taibbi, and he ended his with a clip of Matt Taibbi, because Taibbi in Hate Incorporated says you can make an entire career out of being wrong as long as you're wrong in the approved ways. Like, you're wrong in the same ways that your team is. Yeah. And so you can just literally lie, and there's no accountability. But the other end of that, so that's the one thing where tech elevates and credentials and approves, things that are just abject bullshit. And the other side is that they will not allow things that are true, even if it's verifiably true. And so, like, I've been doing that. I want to tell you about this. I don't think I told you about this experiment that I've been doing on Facebook. Have I?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I reactivated my Facebook. I hate it. I had shut it down after the election because I'm like, this place sucks. It's I'm gonna do a whole video about this because I'm gonna show the screenshots of the stuff that I was doing. But in the video, I'm probably gonna mention something that Facebook anymore is just bad memes and pictures of people's kids. And it's like, honestly, like, if I wanted to see a picture of your kid, like, if you're the type of person who I care about a picture of your kid, I probably see you in person. Yeah. And so I see your kid in person anyway. So it's just, I don't know what people use Facebook for, to be honest. And so, but what I've been doing is, so did you see, I post about this, their new guidelines they issued like 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Facebook's like, COVID misinformation guidelines.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
I've heard about it. I didn't look at them. Did you see any of
the specifics of this stuff?
No.
Okay, dude, these are crazy, crazy. Among the things that are in there that they said, these are just a few of them, but there's a whole list of these things. So a lot of these statements of their updates are posts that might not violate our guidelines, and one of those buts was like, okay, if you are praising or celebrating healthcare workers who are protesting vaccine mandates, mm-hmm. they will censor that post, or they reserve the right to take it down or censor it or remove it. If you're just saying, hey, I stand with these workers, or good for them for doing that. The one that gave me the idea to do this experiment was, they said, if you make a post that might not necessarily violate our guidelines, but includes information that is either potentially or actually true, including personal anecdotes about negative experiences with the vaccines, but nevertheless might discourage people from getting them, they will be removed or censored. So if you have an actual adverse event and you say, hey, this bad thing happened to me, it's verifiable from getting that, Facebook said, we reserve the right to remove that or censor that.
Wow.
And they literally say, actually true. And so, and because they're like, well, because it still might discourage someone from getting it. So I said, well, if they're willing to censor truth that has a conclusion they disagree with, how will they feel about lies that have a conclusion they agree with? So I spent 2 weeks. I put a little lens on my Facebook profile picture that's like, let's get vaccinated or something like that. They had those little lenses or filters you can put on there. Mm-hmm. They also have others that are like clearly geared towards conservatives. And I'm like, yeah, if you don't think they're using that as part of some algorithm to flag your account, if you pick one of those filters, like, you're out of your mind. They're absolutely using that for that.
Yes.
But anyway, so I started slow, but I just was seeding my timeline with increasingly more insane posts about the dangers of COVID-19. So the first one was something simple where I'm like, because it was right after the Pfizer vaccine was approved. Mm-hmm. So I said, is there any word on when this will be approved for kids younger than 12, which, by the way, Pfizer wasn't approved for 13, 14, or 15. Or 12, 13, 14, or 15. So it's only for 16 and above. So there's the first thing that's misleading in it. But I said, I don't want because we want our 2-year-old to be able to get vaccinated as soon as possible, because we don't want to be among the tens of thousands of parents that have lost a toddler to the Delta variant alone, that's
so you basically just made
false,
a
right?
lot of stuff up. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm getting a lot of likes from people on the left. There's a few conservatives that, that's the people that are on the left that are still have me as a friend on Facebook. And then I'm getting conservatives that are like, I don't think those numbers are right. And I treated it like Twitter, where I didn't really reply to anything. There was a few times that I did, but then it was stuff like parents, who are opposed to mask mandates in schools. Like, listen up. This isn't about you. This isn't about politics. It's about not letting your child be one of the millions of elementary school children that have died unnecessarily due to their parents' politics, and stuff like that. And I'm like, wait, and I'm always putting these hashtags like wear a mask, get vaccinated, and I just kept upping the ante. And there was a few times where people were like commenting back,
They're like, what are you doing?
These numbers are, do you have a source for this? So that one time a person asked me for a source, and I included a link to a CDC article about feline leukemia in panthers, and no one read it. There was one person that read it, and they're like, is this the one you meant to send? And I said, why are you wanting more information anyway? Just trust the science, get the booster shot, and stop killing people. And they're like, dude, like, I'm not, what are you talking about? Like, I think this is personal choice. And I said, well, your personal choice is killing billions. And, and finally had to message a few people and say, dude, I'm trolling. Like, stop. Like, please don't delete these, because they add legitimacy to this, but this is an experiment. Like, don't. And I kept upping the ante. One of the last ones, like, I did stuff, like, the science is in, there are zero risks or downsides or negative effects to taking a COVID-19 vaccine. COVID-19 vaccines are the only way to guarantee the prevention of infection or transmission of COVID-19. So do your part, get vaccinated, and let's end this thing, for like things like that. One of the last ones that I did that was just I was like, just take a moment to reflect on the fact that we've lost more, we've lost more elementary school aged kids to the Delta variant alone than all casualties of both world wars combined. And, and so it's like, these are demonstrably false statements, demonstrably false.
Yes.
Like, and like those are some of the ones where I had people that were conservatives who were like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not true. There's like, no
Truman,
way this is
what
true.
happened? What happened?
Yeah. So like, and then what I did was, after doing this for a couple of weeks, I had some friends who I let them in on it. And I said, I need you to start flagging these posts as misinformation to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So they did. They flagged them. It's been a week. Nothing has happened with those posts. This was maybe 5 days ago, I even made a post myself where I said, hey, I'm really concerned. I'm seeing a lot of misinformation about the COVID-19 and the vaccines on Facebook. Thank God the Facebook fact checkers are catching most of it. But in the event that you stumble upon something that slipped through the cracks, here's a step-by-step guide on how to flag misleading or, misinformation posts about COVID-19. And I literally did 4 screenshots of like, click here, click this, and then submit. And I was like, outside of getting vaccinated and wearing a mask, this is fighting dangerous misinformation is the best thing we can do to defeat COVID-19. And so I'm literally saying, report me, report my posts. Like, and I sent that link to people. I'm like, here's how you can report some of these posts, there was one person that got it and commented and was like, where's all the Facebook fact checkers on this? And I was like, this guy gets it. Like, like he understands it. But anyway, as of right now, they still haven't flagged any of those. I'll tell you and here was like the best, like, fine point on what I did that demonstrates just how screwed this is. Okay. So on my post that was about, there are 0 downsides or negative consequences or anything about the COVID-19 vaccine.
Right.
A friend of mine who knew what I was doing, or at least he figured it out. I didn't tell him, but he figured it out like off the bat. And so he comments with this little 4-panel comic, and his comment of this little comic gets flagged as partly false misinformation with an explanation of why it's misinformation. Hear what those 4 panels said. So they're all of a guy getting vaccinated, and he's talking to the nurse. And the first thing he says is, so this will keep me from catching COVID, right? And she says, no. And he says, well, I don't have to wear a mask anymore though, do I? And she says, well, no. Or she says, yeah, you do. And then the third one is, well, but I can at least sue the manufacturer if something goes wrong, right? And she says, no, you can't. And the fourth one is him saying, so why am I getting this again? And she says, I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm told. That got flagged as misinformation. None of those things are false. None of those things are false. But my post saying there are literally no negative downsides or consequences, and that getting vaccinated guarantees the infection, like catching COVID or spreading COVID, which all of this demonstrably false. That doesn't get flagged, but the true response does get flagged.
Right.
So that's like I said, I'm going to do a video about this. I wanted to give it a few more days, just to see if they'll fact check it or do any of those things. But I'm going to include the screenshots of everything because they're actually kind of hilarious. But that's where they're at. That's how this big tech thing works. They will elevate shit like Rolling Stone and Rachel Maddow and No Consequences, calling ivermectin horse paste or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
But I can talk about how COVID has killed more elementary school kids in both world wars. And that's totally fine because it has a conclusion they agree with. So I can be right or I can be wrong as long as it's in the approved way.
God, you should do a Substack write-up on that. That would be a great Substack article. I don't have a
Substack, man.
It's pretty easy to start, dude. It would just be a great Substack article. I would share the heck out of that. But no, I mean, but this is like what we're talking about. It's like, when I was on the left, I never worried about tech censorship. Never. Didn't even cross my mind. And it's like, I'm not even on the right. And if I post almost anything on Facebook, I'm going to get a tag on it. Almost anything. It could be literally, and it's like, I'm thoroughly convinced, Truman. Like I'm convinced we're all going to get banned on like all big tech platforms at some point. I'm going to lose my Twitter. I'm going to lose my Facebook. I'm going to lose my YouTube. Yeah. Absolutely, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I mean it is, and that's honestly that's going to be one of the things I'm going to put in that video that I make, or if I write something up, I'll put in that. Is like I honestly thought about calling it "Dear Idiots on Facebook." Because it's like, why are you still on this platform?
Yeah.
Why are you still on this? Now, for people like us, like, and Bridget Fennessy has said this before, I've heard other people say, it's like, Twitter is a necessary evil. You have to self-promote. You have to use it. And you can engage with other people who are like-minded in a way that you can't in a lot of these other places. And so there is utility to Twitter. And until we have a viable alternative, like, we're going to have to use it. I do think that, and I mean, that's, again, like, whether you're an author or some type of creative or artist or whatever, that's how you get promoted. Like, like all of these places, they look and say, how's your social media game? How's your Twitter account? You know what I mean? And
but that's exactly it. Because it's not even, sorry to interrupt, but like, it's not even that, like, that's the place where you do your, like, you get the most promotion. It's just that other places look at your follower count. Because I'll tell you what, Truman, like, I track all of my, like, I used to do marketing. I track what I get from every single social network. I get less than 2% from Twitter. It's not like there's really not that much there in terms of like driving people to my other platforms or driving people to my videos or what have you. It's less than 2%, but it's like, you have to be on there. Like, it's where the battleground takes place. It's where all the journalists are. It's where, like, most journalists are writing their news stories based on stuff they see on Twitter. It influences policy
too. It absolutely influences policy and corporate decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only reason to be on that cursed site, because it is awful other than that. And I'm going to tell you this too. Can we talk for a second? And this is getting a little bit off course, but it's just something I've noticed. Like, people on Twitter are getting very, very angry. They're getting very angry, and it's never been good. But at least my experience on Twitter is, I think that a lot of people, I mean, maybe it's just because I have a lot of people on the right on my Twitter, but they're spinning each other up and they're getting very, very angry. And it's like, Joshua and I were talking about this. It's like, you get on that platform and you're going to war. There is nothing else to do on Twitter except read the news and go to war. And that is it. But like, it's not like that on Locals. Like, Locals is nice. People are normal. People are chill. But I feel like some of these platforms are specifically like people are getting very, very angry, and angry people make dumb decisions. And it's really, that's probably one of the things I'm most afraid of, is how this addiction to anger and outrage is going to ultimately end up manifesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a theory on that I came up with 30 seconds ago, which is, so one of the things I've been saying is that, and I hate this vernacular, and I always give that disclaimer because it's true, but I've been saying this fall is going to be lit. It is, because this last summer, people were able to largely segregate based on their ideology, right? Like you could have like the mask, people on either side of a lot of these issues were able to largely segregate. And so their outrage was often calibrated to the level that they were having to engage with the competing idea. And since that was often digital and not practical, it was calibrated to the digital and not practical. It was calibrated to cosplay in a lot of ways. Not for everyone, not even for like, I think for a plurality of people, it was calibrated to real life to varying degrees. But my point is that, so what I wrote down here, sorry, like I said, I just thought of this 45 seconds ago, but is that since school has started, because the whole reason why I thought fall was going to be lit is that people were going to be forced to share physical space, and competing ideas were going to be forced to vie for the same physical space. There's almost infinite room online for people to occupy digitally. You know, they'll find their corner, they'll find their echo chamber, but it's when you're fighting for the same physical space that you see a lot of the clashes. And since school has started back up, that's where we're getting these school board meetings. That's where we're getting clashes in parking lots based on mass stuff. There was a thing in, I read this is weeks ago, but how there was a school in Colorado that had the sheriff's department at their school for a week, or they had planned to, I haven't followed up on it, for when school started, to be there in order to mitigate anything from parents who are opposed to the mask mandates for the kids. And as this stuff, as the vaccine mandates are occurring for parent or for teachers, and you know what happens at the places where the parents going to be required to wear a mask, because then think about sports is starting, fall sports,
right?
So people that are, you know, what happens if they're going to be required to wear a mask or be vaccinated to attend their kids' basketball game or something. We're already seeing some of this stuff with college sports. A guy posted on my locals, he's been great, he's super interesting dude, he lives in Portland, and he was talking about how he went to one of the opening game of the season for whatever university it was, that's over there. I guess I don't really pay attention to that conference, and he said at the beginning, most people were in masks, and by the end of the game, 90% of the people had taken them off. And my wife had a relative who posted on Facebook, or I don't know where it was, Instagram maybe, about how this relative's on the East Coast, I think, and how they went to a college football game, and how she was super upset that they weren't requiring masks. And so we're seeing this stuff happening. I know. So where I live, the policy is that even if you're vaccinated, if you're a teacher, if you're a faculty member, you have to wear a mask. For kids, it's optional, but there's a lot of social pressure to do it depending on the school. But if you're an administrator or a teacher or whatever, and you're at like the district building or the district home office or something like that, you don't have to wear a mask.
Wow.
And so there are all of these things. My point is that as the inconsistency, as the hypocrisy, and as the anger that's naturally generated from these incompatible ideas now being forced to vie for the same physical space, I think that we're going to see more and more of that anger like rising to the surface, because before it was people responding to a news story that was understandably infuriating. Now it's them responding to an event. Now it's them responding to, why is my kid having to wear a mask? They are not at risk. Or why is my 14-year-old, who we made the decision for them to get vaccinated, why are they having to do this? And so I think that anger that you're noticing is real, because people are seeing this monster more and more in their personal life and encountering it and being inconvenienced or seeing the hypocrisy of it. And I think that we're going to reach an inflection point in some way. But does that make sense? I think the anger is calibrated to the frustration and how they're encountering it in their lives.
It definitely does make sense, and it actually makes me feel a little bit better, to be honest, that there's some explanation for this, and that I'm not just kind of like seeing things or making things up. But I mean, this is not tenable. Like where we're going is not tenable. We were just talking about this before we came on the air. But like, you know, I've been, one of the things I've been talking about on Twitter lately is that, you know, I'm revisiting the whole issue of like critical race theory isn't anti-white, because it actually tells, you know, Black people they can't get an ID, they are not very smart, they can't work hard, they can't do all this stuff. If Larry Elder is a white supremacist, that's not actually an anti-white statement, that's an anti-Black statement. And, you know, they actually, critical race theory paints white people as the most powerful people in all of society. So,
and it scapegoats whiteness. I think James has it right. It scapegoats whiteness, but that's not the same as it being centered around some anti-white thing. Scapegoat is just the thing you're blaming. It's not the central thing.
No, it's not the central thing, and it's not even the most important thing. Like the big bad boogeyman of critical race theory, and is capitalism. It's not white people; it's capitalism. That's what they're really attacking. But I've been going down this road of like, of talking about this issue again, just because I think it's really important. And one of the things that I discovered at one point is that this is language that's specifically being kind of like pushed by really bad people. People that are very angry, that are very disillusioned, that are actually advocating for a white ethno state, very, very bad people. And one of the greatest fears I have is that it doesn't take, I think this group of people is bigger than people think it is, but it doesn't even take that many people to cause a massive amount of chaos and a massive amount of disruption. In fact, it just takes one person doing something really, really stupid.
One guy driving into a crowd in Charlottesville shaped the narrative for the entire Trump presidency.
Exactly. It was one guy. It was one guy who did something horrific and stupid and is now the poster child for every Trump supporter ever. And it's going to happen again. This community of people it's going to happen again. And I'll tell you what, Truman, there's also an awful lot of, so the places that are feeding this ideology, it's coming, you know what, do you want to guess where it's coming from? Because it might not be where you expect.
Cartoon Network.
It's coming from QAnon. It's coming from QAnon.
Dude, I don't know shit about QAnon,
no,
and that's largely on purpose.
No. And I don't know much about it either. But here's what I do know is that people got, like, I believe the QAnon was a psyop. I do. And I think that people got sucked into it. It was completely effective at what it was trying to do, which was to suck people in and to make them do crazy things. So then the government could overreach and grab more power. Right. Yeah. And so there are an awful lot of people out there that got sucked into QAnon and that were absolutely trust the plan, completely convinced that no matter what happened, Trump was absolutely going to be president. And then, Joe Biden gets inaugurated, and then it's just like, wait till March or May or whatever their next thing was. And it was like, because that was the original inauguration day and the US is a corporation and, Trump is going to be inaugurated on that next original inauguration day. And then that day comes and passes. And then it was wait till June, and then it was wait till July. And all of these major QAnon dates are coming and passing. Well, what's happening at the same time is that all of these QAnon people who spent years of their lives completely engrossed in this fabrication, this psyop, where they were fed information and then went down. I mean,
pedophile rings and all this
everything.
Crazy nonsense.
Like, if you look at some of the you talk about that guy, like the meme of the guy with like the string on the wall and like everything. That's literally QAnon.
It's Charlie Day. Yeah, it's from Always Sunny. Yeah, I know. It's good.
But that's literally what QAnon does. Like, they have all these charts with like these lines and connections and all this stuff, but they've been getting more and more angry and more frustrated. And they're starting to feed into these extremist movements that are not only like, really angry at the anti-white nature of what's going on, but they're also, frankly, highly anti-Semitic. Like, the amount of anti-Semitism I've seen in these communities is ridiculous. And so we have...
Deb posted some stuff about that recently on Twitter too, about some of the comments she was getting on her YouTube stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I am called the Jew all the time. Every single time I mention the anti-white stuff, I'm called the Jew ad nauseum forever. And people can go and look at my comments if they want to see it.
By the way, as if that's a slur. Like,
exactly.
What is that? Anyway.
Exactly. But that's exactly how they're using it. But my point is, we have a very significant, not very significant enough population of people who are extremely angry, disaffected, and frankly, really detached from reality. And that's
vulnerable. They're vulnerable.
That's another way. Yeah, they're very vulnerable. They're easy to. It is easy to manipulate the worldview of these people if you are doing it within the right way. And I think we're going to see someone do something really stupid, and I think it's going to be catastrophic, to be really honest.
Well, and what I don't disagree with you in the slightest. And one of the issues, there's a couple of things there, and I'm going to use this as what I think is going to be we'll see if I can stick the landing, but I think this is going to be a solid transition. But so you have not just the issue that someone's probably going to do something, but that we know that it will be embellished to the nth degree and made to be like what we just talked about Charlottesville. It's like, here's the example. And they always ignore anything that's disconfirmatory. That's why you get like, no one covered the story about the guy in Chicago that shot someone who walked into the store without a mask and claimed self-defense, followed him back out and shot him. Now that guy's going to go to jail, but it's like, well, can we talk about how do you get a person who's that unstable in the first place to even think that's a logical like statement to make? Or what that woman who lost visitation rights for her kid because she was unvaccinated. And so they don't cover those things. They don't cover the crazy shit that happens for the, like on the other side. Like, remember there was that dude that was throwing Molotovs at the ice place in Colorado, and sure enough, like they don't cover that. Like that can't possibly be representative of anything on this side, but then they'll use and when they do talk about it, they'll quote MLK's, riot is the language of the unheard. And they won't give his quotes where he's like, but riots are still wrong, right? That's not an approval. It's just a statement of fact or an observation that he's made. He has other places, even after he said that, where he's like, yeah, but riots are still wrong, obviously. But the problem with what you just described of these frustrated people is that it's the same thing that we see. And I've decided I'm probably going to try and turn this into like much longer, because I've been writing about this thing for over a year off and on about the frustration aspect, is that those people on the radical who are vulnerable to explanations for their frustration exist on the left and the right. I think that's the Antifa types who are like, capitalism's to blame for my student loans. So I'm down with the system. Fuck it. And the same with the people on the right who are vulnerable to this QAnon stuff. They're like, well, it must be the Jews. Fuck it. And it's like, the Michael Malice, and I think actually Kevin and I are going to include this. We're going to record our next Road to Surfing thing tonight. But I was like, this quote goes directly into what we're going to be talking about. Is in Malice's book, The New Right, he says, even if the alt-rights, if all of their proposed solutions were wrong, that doesn't invalidate the underlying criticisms that they make. And the point that I make is that also applies to the radical left. Even if you think their underlying solutions are untenable, like Bernie Sanders, all of his solutions are untenable, that doesn't mean his criticisms are wrong. And so there's a very real frustration that is growing on both the left and right. And that's where you're getting these fringe groups that are able to bring in more, or at least be appealing to more and more people, because there is some seeds of actual frustration. Like, if you're a person who's frustrated about the results of the 2020 election, or how the news handled it, or how the news handled Hunter Biden's laptop, or anything like that, like, you have reason to be mad. Right. Or how, then we get news about the vaccines literally, like, what wasn't it, like 4 days after the election, that we're going to have, you know what I mean? They literally withheld it for a week. Twitter, Facebook, all of those places got rid of, you couldn't even share the New York Post story about it was the New York Post. Yeah. About the Hunter Biden's laptop. Yep. Like, if you're frustrated about that, join the club, man. Me too. And so it's like, that's a real frustration, but then they become vulnerable to, because they're isolated or whatever, to some of these fringe things. And it's the same on the left and the right. So I think it's a very real frustration, and we have to figure out how to address that. 'Cause if we don't, we're not going to be able to actually handle the underlying problem. And I think that's where it gets into what you mentioned earlier with the competing institutions. Competing institutions help to offer competing narratives, competing solutions, competing ideas that aren't extreme, that aren't going to facilitate like extremism in terms of creating these batshit echo chambers where the only solution being offered is it must be Jews or it must be capitalism, which actually you want to talk about uniting the left and the right. That's what the Nazis did. It was lit. They said it's the Jews, and the Jews represent capitalism, and they represent the West. And that was how they were able to put the Jews were the face of their fight against capitalism and the Western imperial powers. And so there's the radical left, blame capitalism. There's the radical right, blame the Jews. It's like, that's the fucking Nazis agree with you both.
Wow.
But anyway, but my point is we need competing institutions, I think, to help at least
I don't
mitigate some of that.
I don't even think it's just about competing institutions. I mean, when I kind of got thrust into all of this a year and a half ago, I was very focused on like, how do we create dialogue? How can we just have civil dialogue and like experimenting with that? And what I ended up discovering was, quite frankly, like the left was so committed to demonizing anything that Trump supporters ever said ever, that it was impossible to create environments, at least in the way that I was trying to do it. I had very limited success with this, where civil dialogue could be sustained over the long term when you had both left and right. And it wasn't because of the right. The right was always at least the ones that I was witnessing were like curious about like, why do you think like what you do? Like if they were going to ask someone on the left, like they would ask me all the time, like, why did you think this? Like, we don't understand. Like they just weren't exposed to the same things I was. But if you were to ask someone on the left, they were not at all convinced in, they were not at all interested in understanding the right. They were interested in convincing the right to think like them. And I can't tell you how many emails I got when I started that original Facebook group from people on the left saying, well, you know, they're breaking the rules because they don't agree with me. And I would go and look at the conversation and I would see someone that was trying to force their ideas on someone else and just couldn't handle that they had a different worldview. It was just like, you just disagreed. Like no one was doing anything wrong. You just disagreed. And so, I really became disillusioned with this whole idea of even being able to have these conversations. And then once the election came around and all of the aftermath of the election, it's like, I don't even know if we're in a place where it's possible anymore. And the reason that this is problematic, if you will, is that, you know, there's this book by Patrick Lencioni, who I quote all the time because Patrick Lencioni is one of the more accessible like workplace trainers and coaches.
5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he's written a lot of other ones too, but it's either, I think it's in 5 Dysfunctions, where he says, in order to get people to buy into an idea, to buy into a decision, you don't need them to agree with the decision, but you do need to make them feel heard, understood, and considered within the context of that decision. And right now we're in this reality where people on the right do not feel heard, understood, or considered. And in fact, they're told to just shut up and agree. And if you don't, you're a horrible person and you just want to kill everyone, you idiot, why don't you just take the vaccine? Right. And in order to overcome this, the only way to overcome this is to help people feel like someone has any interest in listening to them. It's not even about agreeing with them. It's in just listening to them.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's where the competing institutions, I think it's like, if you see your ideas being taken seriously or your perspectives being taken seriously, you're going to feel heard, I think, through that. But I think the other thing that you said there, that what that made me think of is, you know, when you talk about the left versus right thing, is that the right often engages with an idea as an idea, what they perceive as an idea. They're like, I want to know why you like believe that idea. Like what makes you think that that's a good idea or a valid idea, right? But the left, the reason why they're not curious quite often is because it's not an idea, it's a belief. Right. And so if it's not just that, or one, it's not an idea, it's a belief. Two, if they think it's a belief on the other person's part and it's an evil belief or it's an immoral belief, they're not curious about it. I'm not curious why someone's a pedophile. I'm not curious why someone's racist or a Nazi or evil in any of the myriad of ways they can be evil. I just am mostly interested in them not being evil. Like that's my first and foremost goal is it's like, if you're an evil piece of shit, like we can do the understanding part later, but I need you to not be evil right now because evil is a threat. And so I think it's the idea versus belief thing. And if you believe that you're morally superior and the person you're talking to is immoral or evil, I think you have just given yourself permission to not care. Right. Like you and to not have to try and understand, because why would you? Is there any other realm where something is truly evil that you're like, man, I'm really curious how someone landed on beating their wife. Like, man, I want to know what makes them tick. It's like, no, I want you in jail. Like, I don't care what makes you tick. But I think that's the same mentality here that's been conditioned. And I mean, I've talked about this before. I mentioned it in that interview with James Lindsay, where I'm like, they are increasingly adding like this hostility to the other side as an official tenant. Like, if you aren't actively shitting on these people, then you're a problem like that. Like, and so they're crafting this like rough draft of a new tenet to their like orthodoxy that says these people aren't just evil, but they're evil and a threat, and you need to be actively opposed to them. I mean, wasn't it so Jennifer Rubin, who by the way, this is why I honestly think that my Twitter is underrated. Jennifer Rubin, she had something where like it was come down on the unvaccinated or something the other day, and she had some other crazy thing that she tweeted out, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Jennifer Rubin is the modern media complex's version of like Charlie Sheen in 2011. Just a train wreck of insanity, just unapologetically winning crazy. You know, that Jennifer Rubin is Charlie Sheen, you know, in whatever that like iteration of it is.
Right.
But you have that, and there was an opinion piece in it wasn't in the Washington Post, I think, had an opinion piece that said make unvaccinated people wait at the end of the line.
Oh yeah, I saw
in
that,
hospitals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, like
wasn't healthcare a human right like a week and a half ago?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was your tweet about it. Yeah, exactly. And so like but I mean, I think what I said in response to that was, yes, it is a human right. So all you do is you dehumanize the people that you're moving to the back of the line. So you're totally consistent. Well, they're not a human, so they don't have this right. And so, but that's what they're doing. And like, I made threads about this post, like they are working, like continually running. The way the left works with their ideas is they're like a child, like who is learning the bounds of human behavior. They will keep doing things until they find what the limitations are of that thing.
Yes.
That's what that was the whole premise of the article that I wrote about the election and what was at stake, is that the left needs to find the limits quick, fast, and in a hurry of the crazy shit that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so, and if they win the election, however that happened, then that's going to validate everything they did. So they will just crank up the volume on it. And my point is that what started as a whisper with these unvaccinated people, man, because remember, it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated, mm-hmm. right? And then it was, oh, well, since it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, that's why we have to re-implement these draconian measures. That's why we have to go back to masks and lockdowns and whatever else. Aren't you pissed off about all these new things? Man, it's not the regular people, to quote Alabama's governor. It's not the regular people, it's the unvaccinated people that are a problem. They're the ones letting us down. You have Don Lemon saying you can't participate in polite society, right? You have Joe Biden says, you're not as smart as I thought you were if you still won't get vaccinated. Like all of these things, Tony Fauci, saying like, okay, look, I get your point about freedom and liberty, but you need to take just tamp down on that idea and just get with the program. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, fuck your freedoms, right?
Yeah, for real.
And Jennifer Rubin come down on the unvaccinated, all of the, like you don't want to live in a world where the Washington Post can post article or print articles about why literally advocating for medical apartheid with no pushback. They should be able to write that article, but the fact that there's no pushback, they haven't found the limitations of this dehumanizing process yet. Right. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And I don't know what made me think about that, but that's what I have to say in response to whatever that made me think about that.
It's going to get real bad. And I think it's going to get really bad quickly. And the problem is that if like we lose the fight on this vaccine passport thing, we're going to lose all future fights. I have no doubt. Yeah. There's no coming back from that. There's none. We're done.
Yeah, that was, I put I did a video. In my video, this was months ago, when the mask debate came back up, I said, this is a fight worth having, mm-hmm. because if you don't have this fight, and it's not going to be comfortable, because there's going to be people that disagree with you for honest and valid reasons. It's not going to be fun with your close relationships that disagree with you. But if you don't have this fight now, it will immediately turn into vaccine mandate. It's going to shift from mass to vaccines, mm-hmm. immediately. And that's what happened. And so, and you're 100% right. If we don't win this fight, and that was what that thread I did on Twitter earlier today was about, why the religious exemptions aren't going to hold. I don't think they will hold. The precedent isn't on our side. There is literally nothing I can find that tells me that these will hold. I mean, they in that NBC article that I unpacked, California and a few other states got rid of religious exemptions for vaccines years ago, including for children. So yeah, so you're right. And that's what, again, in that interview with Lindsay, I said, the COVID thing to me has shot way ahead of the CRT stuff in terms of urgency.
Yeah.
Because like the CRT stuff, of course, is important, but it's
long term.
Exactly. It does have short-term consequences, but it's not like as in your face as, oh, you're a pregnant woman in New York and you want to go to the grocery store. Well,
right.
better get the shot then. That's way more pressing. And so you're right. If we lose that, and by the way, I think we will lose that. The question is where, because we have lost it in some places. So it's not about winning and losing. It's about, can we maintain, or can we at least win in some places and allow for, I think, as Kevin put it, like a control burn. Like it's just another iteration of Portland going to hell, or LA going to hell, or San Francisco going to hell.
I think if they are able to institute some sort of mandate to have the vaccine in order to travel on public transportation or in order to fly, we are effed. We're effed.
Well, I think,
and they're trying.
I think they will. Yeah, they've talked about how they can do that. There's precedent in other countries. As soon as Australia passed it, because the first vaccine mandate that, if I remember right, was the Australian Airlines. I'm thinking globally. It might have been Israel. I don't know, but I think at least at the time, my impression it was an Australian Airlines. They were mandating it for intra-state travel. So to go from one place in Australia to another place, you had to have it. And I'm like, okay, there's precedent. There it is. And then the next precedent was France. And I said, okay, now it's going to happen over here. And then immediately it was San Francisco, and then New York announced it like 3 hours after San Francisco, something like that. And so, yeah, like they're going to do that. The one hope that I have is that I hope that the absolutely insane and untenable, as you put it very accurately, and polarizing nature of what this is going to be over the next several months, I hope that and I think I mentioned this in our last episode, I hope that it shapes the 2022 election in a positive way.
Yeah.
The midterms.
I hope so. But then, of course, I always fear that Republicans are going to screw things up just because they can.
Yeah. I mean, but it's a question of, did you accidentally point the loaded gun at a person, and apologize profusely, or did you point the loaded gun at a person and shoot him in the face? Like, both of those are mistakes. One of them is way worse than the other, I do have a question I want to ask you about, like, kind of on this, I don't know if it's on this topic, but just want to pick your brain a little bit on Afghanistan to pivot.
Oh God, completely. Sure. Yes.
So,
what's funny before we get into this is I literally just was on Hunter Avalon's stream like an hour ago, and he started off with, I think Joe Biden's doing pretty great as president, and I thought the withdrawal from Afghanistan was really well done. And I was like, Hunter, have you fallen down and hit your head? I understand you're trying to appeal to this little leftist community, because he and I normally have like okay conversations, like we have a good rapport, and like, I mean, I feel for the kid on some level, but I was like, what are you doing?
Like one of those kids on TikTok, one of those libs of TikTok videos where you have some complete dipshit authoritatively talking about anything.
That's exactly.
I'm not saying Hunter is that, but I'm just saying, like, it's the same reaction of just like,
okay, like it was almost one of those things where I was like, I'm not even going to get into a debate with you on this because I think it's so ridiculous. Anyway, to your far more serious point.
I guess the Earth could be flat. I don't know. So who's to say? Who's to say? Trust the science. So the Afghanistan thing was interesting because, well, actually, first, let me ask you, I don't want to talk about the thing itself, but I want to kind of play around with the coverage of it.
Okay.
And the way that the, corporate press covered the events, covered the fallout, even just yesterday, I'm seeing stuff about, like, there was a, don't think it was Out Magazine, but it was some like gay advocacy thing. I don't know what it was. Some organization was talking about, they were telling stories of at least one dude was a gay person in Afghanistan. He's like, oh, I couldn't get out, so now I'm running for my life because they want to murder me. So we're back to women in forced under Sharia law, and back to gay people being hunted down. So that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk about the coverage and kind of where it stands, and just what your overall impression has been of just the way it's been covered largely by again, corporate press. So we'll say like, CNN, NPR types, MSNBC, because I think there's some interesting questions and interesting observations maybe that we can glean about it that might have some implications for the future.
Well,
But I want to hear like how you kind of processed that whole thing. I know that's a lot, but maybe do you kind of at least understand what I'm talking about?
So this all happened right after we filmed the last podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't
Yep.
even talked about this yet. Okay. So like my initial thought on it was when I first started seeing it unfolding, I was kind of like, well, this is kind of screwed up, but we never should have been there in the first place.
Sure.
And so I was honestly a little bit dismissive of the whole thing, because I like, my position on Afghanistan has always been, since the moment we went into Afghanistan, we shouldn't be there in the first place. Like, I was protesting this stuff on the Boston Common in college. I never thought it was a good idea. And then it just went on and on and on and on and on. So I was very much in favor of us withdrawing from Afghanistan. Yep. And I always thought that like once we did leave Afghanistan, it was probably going to go right back to where it was to begin with, because we never should have been there in the first place. And honestly, when it was first starting to unfold, I was a little bit annoyed at people, because I was like, the lesson that at least the right is going to take from this is not that we never should have been there in the first place. It's that Joe Biden is a horrible military leader. And I was like, that is like that may be true, but that is precisely the wrong lesson to learn in this scenario. But then as it just kept like unfolding and getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, I was like, this is not just an average F up. This is like a FUBAR of epic proportion.
Yep. Category 5.
Oh my God, it's so bad. And you see like that image of the helicopter next to the image in Saigon, and then like Kamala Harris traveling to Vietnam right after that, as though like how did they not see that symbolism?
Was it Vietnam or Cambodia?
No, she went to Singapore and Vietnam.
Singapore, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah. But it was just like it's so tragic. And it's so, I mean, it's tragic in a way that's like almost like untenable to even think about how disastrous this withdrawal was. And then when I'm not 100% like, a lot of people have made the connection with, oh, the military is doing all this woke stuff and that's what caused them to fail. I'm not 100% convinced that you can draw a direct line. I mean, I think there's some loose like connections that are probably be made, but I'm not convinced that you can draw a direct line from woke training in the military to the absolute.
You could say that anything, so to put a fine point on that, you could say that anything that distracts from being on mission has the potential to compromise the mission. That's the best line that I can draw there.
You can make that argument.
Anything that's not the mission could harm the mission.
Yes, yeah. I do think that that's true. I just think like a very direct line is being drawn with, they did woke training and then they had this giant scrub. I think I don't think there's that direct of a line. I think there are probably many things that cause this. But I mean, some of the stuff I heard was that like, Kamala Harris, who of course made a big deal about saying, I was the last one out of the room on Afghanistan, suddenly became non-existent when it comes to anything related to Afghanistan. I heard that she was like they asked her to do a speech on that Sunday night after it all first started, and she was heard screaming, they aren't going to pin this shit on me. And it's like, so it's like, it seems as though it went wrong at literally every single level. And I don't watch a lot of the mainstream media, so I actually don't know exactly how it's been covered, but I do know that CNN turned on Biden and was basically starting to report at least some of the actual realities. And in a way where it almost seems like someone gave them permission to start reporting on these actual realities. So I guess those are my general thoughts so far.
So I'm really glad you said that last part. And there are definitely, like, I will say what's funny is you talk about the not being there, or the right will take away that Biden's a military leader, not that we shouldn't have been there. I listened to the Daily Wire backstage where this is all they talked about, and it was a huge debate between Ben and Jeremy Boring were like, maintaining a moderate military presence there, like we do in a bunch of other countries, is not an endless war. Like, we hadn't had a casualty there in like 18 months or something. And, whereas, your best friend, Matt Walsh, and Michael Knowles, and I believe Clavin were all like, we have no business being there. We should remove every troop. Like, this is so stupid. Like, anyway, so you have an agreement with Matt Walsh on at least one thing.
Well, a broken clock is right twice a day, I suppose.
Exactly. That's one of my favorite sayings too. So anyway, so I'm glad you said the last part about CNN, because I did take a drink every time Truman says I made a thread on Twitter, which I actually don't make that many threads on Twitter, but I did a thread on this because I had a friend message me and said, it seems like CNN is turning on Biden. What's going on? And I'm like, no. Like, this is how, and I want to run this by you, tell you what my thoughts are here. And let's, for the literally everyone who's watching this, who probably didn't read that thread that I made on Twitter. But I think that this is a really amazing example of kind of how the cathedral works. Curtis Yarvin talking about the cathedral and like the corporate press and all that stuff, like, of how it works and how you can see the difference in coverage in a few different ways. So one is that, there's like fake news, and there's what you do cover and what you don't cover, right? So I gave some examples earlier about they're not going to talk about the guy who shot the person who wasn't wearing a mask in self-defense, but they'll embellish, or they won't talk about the guy in Colorado throwing Molotovs, but they'll embellish whatever to the nth degree, right? That suits their narrative. So they'll do a lot of this stuff as it's related to race, but anything that's inconvenient, they might not cover it, or they'll downplay it, or they'll spin it, or it'll be incomplete information or something like that. The other thing is it's one thing to suppress facts and to moderate yourself. So I think the wording I used was like restraint. It's one thing to exercise restraint in delivering facts. Like, how much of the story am I actually going to tell? It's another thing to exercise restraint in conclusion. And what I said was that I'm not seeing a lot of restraint in the communication of facts, although there was some restraint there. But I was seeing, and still have, and it's only gotten worse, a monumentally irresponsible amount of restraint when it came to exercising conclusion. Because what you had was them talking about this scenario, because sometimes you get something that you have to talk about.
Right.
Like, they had to cover that, especially because it happened so fast. There was no covering it up, So it wasn't, will we cover this? It was, how will we cover this? Okay. And the massive amount of misery, the tragic loss of human life that, and the fact that it's a complete paradigm shift in terms of, or geopolitical shift in what's going on in the Middle East is enormous. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. The Taliban said China is their best friend when it comes to trade, so this is a story that has such implications, you can't ignore it. Like, that would be a very deafening silence. And so the question is how. And so what I would say is, what you had instead was for them to say, this is what happened. Here it is. Look at how to focus on the tragedy itself and to keep their conclusions about blame to the bare bone minimum thing. And I saw these people saying, well, look, they're covering it. At least they're covering it. I'm like, no. That is the minimum standard of competency for something like this. That's like saying, wow, my Uber driver has a driver's license. Oh my goodness. Like, can you believe it, guys? I am so excited that my Uber driver has the thing that is most required outside of owning a car to do the job. Like, that is not, my dad would say, you don't get gold stars on the calendar for doing what's expected of you. But I saw all these people, and honestly, that response in and of itself is telling in terms of how morally and intellectually bankrupt their coverage has been for years, that when they actually just give you a modicum of information that's appropriate, that people were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, that's so great. You know, it's like the one time in 6 years we came home and dad didn't beat me. Like, what a great day that was, you know? So anyway, like, that's not a celebration.
And you dare not even
but
ask Truman, like, what would it have been like if Trump had been in office?
that's the conclusion part.
God.
So look at how they took every story and made it about Trump's incompetence, his instability, his racism, his character flaws, his defects, all of these things. Every story was, even ones that made no sense whatsoever, were contrived to be about how bad he was at the job and how unfit he was for the job. You don't see any of that with Joe Biden here. Now, they will say things like, they'll ask him the requisite questions, which it's a whole nother thing. You got him up there at press conferences saying, so they told me I have to call. It's like, who told you? Who gave you a list of reporters to call on? Who is actually running this thing? Like, I know, like, that's Scott Adams. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. He's like, no. Stop saying Biden's not in charge and shift to saying, who's in charge? Who's in charge? Make it a question they have to answer instead of just a statement that hangs there. And I think that's absolutely right. It's like, who's giving him lists of questions of who he's going to, anyway, but that's a whole nother thing. My point is you don't see any conversations of like, how much can we trust Joe Biden's competency if this went this bad? You don't see them comparing him, saying this will be nothing like Saigon,
right?
And doing the
Trump
did comparisons.
Trump did with that ad.
Right.
Did you see that ad was epic?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. But you don't see, they're not doing that. You don't see any of those. No, you're never going to see a thing about, well, the Taliban now has more Blackhawks and 85% of the country's on planet Earth. So that's great. You know, or about, like, imagine, okay, here's just one example. Imagine what would happen if Donald Trump gave a literal kill list of names of people that helped us to the Taliban. That would be an impeachable offense. They would say that's negligence of such a high degree that you are unfit for office just for that alone. I mean, look at how they treated his response to Jamal Khashoggi's death. Khashoggi wasn't even a citizen. He was just a green card holder. I'm not downplaying that, but just his reaction to Khashoggi's not death, murder. Khashoggi's absolutely murdered by the Saudi Arabian Empire is undeniable. And Trump didn't handle it very well, but look at how they handled just that.
Right.
You know, and imagine if Trump had given a list of, here's everyone that helped us that's going to get killed. It would be wall-to-wall coverage of the blood is on his hands. Right. They already did that with COVID, but you know, and whatever the Bernstein or no, not Bernstein, Bob Woodward stuff. The blood's on his hands. He downplayed it. It is what it is, right? The Trump pandemic, he got all these people killed. Like, imagine if he actually did a thing. Like, if he actually gave that list. So my point is that to me, it was one of the most glaring and disgusting displays of media bias that I've seen in a long time. And I think a lot of people, it fell through the cracks for them because they were talking about the thing. And if you're on the right, you've already filled in the blanks. You're going to go, here's one more example of why Joe Biden sucks. Right. And you're just going to make that connection without them saying it. And so you're going to assume that's part of it. Whereas the people on the left aren't doing that. Those groups that we're talking about, the gay advocacy groups or the feminist groups, aren't saying, why the fuck did we vote for this guy? Women are not going to, they're not in school. All the women aren't going, they were turned away from school. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They're going back to murdering gay people just for being gay. Are you kidding me? Like, but they're not saying this is Joe Biden's fault. This is the Democrats' fault for doing this.
Oh, it's Trump's fault.
Yeah, exactly. And to the degree that they are talking about blame, they're saying, well, they had a degree. They blamed it on the Afghan military, which is fucking insane. Are you kidding me?
That was exactly what Hunter said. He was like, oh, they were just executing Trump's plan. And I have this quote from this general saying he totally agreed with Trump's plan to withdraw. And I was like, Hunter, agreement with a plan to withdraw.
Hunter or Joe?
Hunter Avalon. I'm talking about Hunter Avalon was saying. I was like,
talking about Hunter Biden. I'm like, whoa.
No, different Hunter. Yeah. No, but I was like, an agreement with a plan to withdraw is not the same thing as agreement with the execution. And it's
and
funny
also that's the only plan of Trump's that they would say that they had to uphold. It's like, what
right.
They didn't uphold anything else that they put in motion. Like, why would they? Right. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
But I was thinking back when you were talking about that, because I remember in college, I went to the College of Communication at Boston University, and so there were like a lot of journalism professors and all this stuff there, and I had to take those classes. And so we actually, I'm remembering back to a specific, like, I guess, class discussion we had about media bias and how media bias doesn't really exist and all this stuff, and anyone who says it does is lying. This was like a long time ago, but but one of the things that is striking to me is that they never taught, in terms of media bias, they always tried to, like, what the left does is they try to position it as, this is just about presenting different perspectives or something like that. But what it really is, how media bias really works, is all the things that they're not saying. You have to, it's not about what they're including in the broadcast. It's about all of the things that they are not including in the broadcast.
100%.
All of the things that they are not telling you. All of the stories that you have no idea that exist. And the only reason we know they exist is because of Twitter.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And so that was the first point that I made about the Afghanistan thing is it's like, if you think this is like heralds the resurgence of some actual like journalism, like you have another thing coming. And again, my hat goes off to the journalist. I think that one gal from CNN, I can't remember what her name was, who did stick around, and covered it as it was unfolding. Like, good for her. But again, the amount of restraint they showed, and not, it's like me, I have been seething this the whole time since it started at the people who voted for this. I just have, and I'm not saying that's fair or right. I'm just being honest about the feelings that I've had. I have friends who served overseas. One of my friends I was talking to was like, yep. So I guess that was for nothing. And when I try to talk to my lefty family members about why this is really hurtful and upsetting, all they can say is, well, Trump would have done it worse, or make it a political instead of just engaging with the fact that I'm upset. And so I've been seething at the people who voted this in. I've been absolutely frustrated with it. But that comes as a natural result of, just like you said, like knowing like what's going on, seeing the bias for what it is. And the people on the left have been blissfully, like, they're not making the connection. They will swallow whatever flimsy excuse they're given. Like, yeah, I guess it was the Afghan military's fault. Yeah, they really did have to adhere to that Trump thing. Did they have to give away all this equipment too? Night vision goggles and all sorts, like, and so that's the first thing. But the other part that I noticed, and why I thought that there's another possible explanation or factor there, and you kind of alluded to it, is the fact that they know, I think that they know, and I will, Scott Adams says, make predictions to test your hypothesis. I don't think Joe Biden's going to make it to the 2024 election. I don't think he will. I think that's
I don't think he will
undeniable. Either. So they have to tee up Kamala Harris in some way, but they can't do it before 2022 because that'll be really destabilizing. And that will be the thing that 2022 is about. So they can't do that, but they can start sowing the seeds. And one of the ways they've done that is, guess who has been conspicuously missing from any of the conversations about this? Kamala Harris. Guess who's been conspicuously missing from any conversation about the border? Do you remember there was that whole thing? It was like, Biden taps Harris to go deal with the border. And then it's like, no, this shit only got worse.
Never goes. Yeah.
And then, and then it's like, well, I guess we're not going to talk about the fact that she was in charge of that. I guess that's just not a thing. They have been so active. It was trending today. There was a piece I think it was CNN or NBC. I think it was CNN, about how Melania Trump has been, really missing in action since the election. And we haven't really seen much of Melania and what's going on there. And it's like, we haven't seen much of Kamala Harris either, guys. We haven't seen much of Kamala Harris. I wonder why that is. So she has plausible deniability and she's distanced. Like, there's very few politicians in modern history that are more unlikable than Kamala Harris. Right. And so it's like, they have to make it where no one associates her. This was the conclusion of that Twitter thread, and I want your feedback on this, please. Is that they have to make it where there's a huge amount of distance between our recollection of her,
right,
and when she needs to be in the spotlight, because no one wanted her in the election. right?
Right.
No one wanted her as vice president. No one was excited about her in the primaries.
Yeah.
She didn't even make it to the primaries.
Didn't even make it to the first one. She mismanaged her campaign so badly. Didn't even make it to the first one.
Well, and also she's terrible. You know what I mean? But like, and so, but my point is that they have to make it where people forget about that she's not associated with any of these fuck ups. Mm-hmm. So that whenever because Biden will step down, they're not going to do. People are talking about like the revoking the 24th Amendment or 25th.
Down nobly, and they'll announce he has dementia.
Yeah, or something exactly. Like and so that's what they'll do. But they need to make it where she's not associated with any of this stuff. And the irony is that her campaign, this is my theory, they're getting the left to accept her will literally be the exact same thesis as getting them to accept Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. Better than the other guy. Right. Nothing in recent memory that you have that's a big mistake, or there's nothing that you can think of, and they'll start. I think that they will simultaneously start kind of propping her up around 2022. And I think the end of 2022, the beginning of 2023, middle of 2023 is when we're going to see them really start to prop her up. That's my prediction. But I think that's part of it, is that they need it to be that Joe Biden is so untenable, and that they've been dehumanizing, the right as, insurrectionists and disease spreading, all these things, grandma killers and racists, that it's just Kamala Harris is just like, it just makes sense. It's the only play that they have. Sense. It's literally the only play they have. That's my thought on all that, on both the coverage of Afghanistan and the implications of it for the future. I don't know. What do you think?
So generally, I agree. I will say that I don't think they saw this coming. I don't think so. I think that this was a complete and total kind of like surprise to them. And so it's like, if we're talking about a plan to prop up Kamala Harris, I do agree with you that I think that they were going to plan to do that at some point. I minimally do not think that Biden was going to run for a second term, but I've also heard enough about like the animosity between their two teams. Like Joe Biden's team is not playing well with Kamala Harris's team, and vice versa right now. Like there is a lot of like, that. Tell me about that. No, it's just like, so there's just been like these rumors, and Jack Posobiec has been the one that's been talking publicly the most, but I've also heard just like private things where basically like Kamala frankly is kind of pissed at them. I guess Kamala's team is like pissed at Biden's team, because Biden's team, I guess, is like, I mean, he is the president, so they are trying to like take the upper hand, but Kamala's team wants to play things a certain way, and then Biden's team makes them play it a different way. And it's just been like, they have not been working well together. And you'll notice too, like Kamala Harris, who was always universally always standing behind Biden in any public appearance that they did. They made it they made it a point to say, this is the Biden-Harris administration. Kamala Harris was always there, except for the press conferences around Afghanistan. She was nowhere to be found.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Distancing her. Whoever's running this thing is all that's on purpose. Is they're like, we don't want her to be associated with this at all.
No. And so I do think that they are going to make moves to prop her up. I think that this whole thing, though, I don't think this thing was like part of the plan. I think they're now having to adapt the plan. But I don't think it was part of the plan. Yeah, I think it helps their plan, though. I do agree with you, though, that I do think it'll come after the 2022 midterms. And I think, I mean, to be honest, like if we want Biden or the Democrats more generally, whoever might be president, to lose in 2024, this is like best case scenario, to be honest. Kamala is an absolutely terrible, mind-bogglingly bad candidate that no one likes. And I do think it's kind of sad, just like as a woman, I would really like to see a woman president. Like that'd be pretty cool. But not her. And she's going to get elevated to this position and be the first unelected woman president. And then I strongly believe in 2024. They got no votes in the primaries or in the general. Yeah. Not just that, who got no votes. Got no votes. And she's going to get it handed to her in 2024. And I actually think that is a really sad thing to have to anticipate that the first woman to be president, even though not elected at all by any stretch, is going to get her ass absolutely handed to her when she actually tries to run. That to me is actually a really sad thing. But I think in terms of like the direction that we want things to go in, I think it's a good thing because there's no one else the Democrats can run. And so, I mean, what I anticipate is what's going to start to happen. I mean, well, I think that Trump's probably going to run. I've been hearing enough rumblings that Trump is going to run. I've been hearing people say that they anticipate the announcement at any moment. But what normally happens in New Hampshire is like 2 years prior to the election, the candidates start showing up and they start like making the rounds at all the little New Hampshire things. And so, I mean, we're going to know pretty quickly who's going to be engaging in the campaign. But it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll be interesting to see if anyone steps up to run against Trump and if anyone steps up in the Democrat role too, because they all know what's going on behind the scenes, right? So is there going to be some Democrat that's like, this is going to go horribly, horribly, horribly wrong, and we should probably have an alternate candidate just in case it does? I mean, could it be even the case, Truman, that the Democrats even find Kamala Harris? Check out this potential reality.
Okay.
Kamala Harris gets elevated to the presidency and polls so badly that even the Democratic Party cannot see way to supporting the first woman president that they installed as a viable candidate in 2024. That's a reality that could happen.
If they did that, they would what they would have to do is she would have to like have some statement of, since I got no votes, you know, it's only right for the people. I'm doing this for the people or something.
Yeah.
And
they'd have to get away. Like she'd have to have like an accident or something, like, or come down with some horrible disease or something like that to get her out of that race. But it could potentially happen that there's just like a rogue Democratic candidate that comes in 2024. If they're smart, that's what they do.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thought that I just had. You were talking about saying that you thought Trump was going to run. How perfect would it be for him to, if he was going to announce that, or whoever, is just take a second to realize the progression of the State of the Union addresses we're going to have, of just like how we're going to be able to compare like Joe Biden giving the State of the Union like on a year by year basis.
To Trump.
Well, yeah, not just to Trump, but to watch him get worse and worse. I mean, he's already worse than he was a year ago on the campaign trail. Right. And on the campaign, there was videos of him where it's like he was worse a year before that point, you know, and where you can compare interviews where it's like the decline, and these things are exponential, you know. And so like, how amazing would it be where it's like after that first State of the Union, you know, Trump gets out there and is like, I don't know if you saw what I just saw, but that's a disaster, and we can't have that. I mean, really, the reality is, if you want to get back, look at, oh shit, man. If you want to look at, you're talking about worst case scenario, and here's where you talk about what the news isn't saying, right? We are 9 months into this, and we have the border is the worst it's been in decades. Gas prices highest in decades. Inflation highest in decades. This Afghanistan thing, it's like, honestly, I'm feeling a lot of empathy for the delusion that a lot of the people on the left had under Trump, because there was all these nothing burger controversies and scandals and crises that they were always like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe you voted for this. And they were nothing almost every single time. They were nothing.
Right.
And it's like, now I'm feeling the same way. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. But like, honestly, I think one of the things that makes it not in our favor is it's at the beginning. People have short memory spans, man.
Oh yeah. Oh, I agree. That's what I said to people when they were saying like, this is going to be the end of Biden's presidency. I'm like, we're not even a full year into Biden. Like, this is going to, like, they're going to forget this in like 3 months. This is going to be like, it never happened. But I mean, I don't know, man. I kind of am enjoying the idea of Trump running again, to be honest, like, cause we're going to get here. And I agree with you about Trump coming on and doing like a response video too. I think Trump did a response to like one of Biden's things. And I was like, what if Trump, every time Biden gave a public address, Trump just comes out and does his version of it? Trump was looking super presidential. He was looking much more presidential than Biden. Trump's been losing weight. He looks good. He's ready to go. I think
someone posted a picture yesterday. They're like, was it Jack Persoba who was like, why does he look younger? Why is he getting younger? It was a
Yeah.
picture of Trump, and I think it's what you said. He's lost weight, but he was like smiling, and it's like the dude looks good.
He had a vacation. He's doing good. Like,
Yep.
so I mean, I think 2 years of Trump campaigning, I hope he announces at some point soon, or maybe like he'll do it after the midterms, like whatever. But we're gonna get to live through another couple of years of Trump campaigning. It's gonna be great. There's gonna be lots of trolls. I'm personally looking forward to that as like a light in all of this darkness. At least we'll be entertained. We might be going to hell in a handbasket, but at least we're gonna be entertained.
Well, and here's the other benefit to that, by the way, for the people that are like the Ron DeSantis stands that don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Here's why that's actually a good thing if Trump ran this time around, is that if Ron DeSantis did run, it would be in such close proximity to all the crazy shit that they've been trying to pin on about Florida.
Yeah.
That Trump running puts literally like 7 years between if Ron DeSantis wanted to do it next time around, it puts a long time between DeSantis and that's, I'm not even saying that that's a scandal, that Florida's a scandal, but they'll make it into that. And so it helps take the heat off of Ron DeSantis so that he can continue to build up, support and work on that resume and showing what the good thing about these governors, by the way, is that as time, so we have an asymmetrical relationship with time. I just finished Nassim Taleb's book, Skin in the Game, and he talked about how the ultimate like fact checker is time. Like the ultimate like verifier of anything is time. Time is what determines my daughter's having a good time out there. And what determines whether something works or not is always time.
Right.
And so like the longer time progresses, as the blue strongholds, those metropolitan hive minds, whether it's the cities or the states like Portland or California or whatever, and the worse they get, the longer we're going to have a test case of how different it is when those places are governed, with such radically different policies. So time is a big friend for Ron DeSantis if he keeps governing well, right? Because you'll be able to contrast. Here's what it's like. So, you say he runs again and wins re-election, right? Here's what it's like. Here's what happened in Florida under Ron DeSantis, again, assuming he does well. And here's what it's been like in these other states. I guess my point is as we continue to segregate, the effects of bad policy or good policy respectively will continue to compound and be evident and will be useful in showing how completely fucked Democrat, often, at least right now, the modern iteration of Democrat, like the prevailing Democrat policies are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And what I've heard is, so did you know that Trump changed his residency from Florida to New Jersey?
Oh yeah, that was a while ago, and people were theorizing that was so that DeSantis could run, right?
That could be so because DeSantis could run as VP.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As VP.
As VP. Because they don't want the president and the VP to be from the same state.
Now that's an interesting theory. That's a really interesting. I had not even ever considered that as a thing. Huh? What do you think about that? What's your take?
I think it'd be a killer ticket, man. I don't want Pence back on that ticket. Because I never liked Pence, to be honest. Yeah, he stepped up in the VP debate, but like Pence is just like, he's way too conservative for me. I think it'd be a great ticket. I think people are really excited about Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is like he's doing a good job. He's standing up to people. He's based. I think it'd be like the perfect VP for Trump, to be honest. I don't think it can't be Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem has dug herself into a ditch that she ain't getting out of. She's way too rhino at this point. Like who else could it be? It's not going to be Pence. Pence would be can you imagine the outcry from Trump's base if it was Pence?
I don't know if that's, I don't, do they not like him?
Oh no, because they feel he betrayed Trump in the whole election thing.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. The only person I could think of would be Ted Cruz, but I don't think he's going to do it for a while. And here's why is that they need the senator, and Ted Cruz did not beat dipshit Beto O'Rourke by that much. I mean, he did beat it, but so I think that they would not risk Texas like losing that senator seat. And Ted Cruz has only gotten cooler and more popular. Like I think after the election, I said whatever update they did on Ted Cruz's operating system was really good because I like this version a lot better than the one in the election. I think he realized he was stodgy and unlikable in the election. He was like a robot lizard or something, man.
Or he just ran out of F's to give,
Maybe. I think
which
that's probably part of it
conceivably
too.
could have happened. Like he was broken by the whole affair. I'd like to see Rand
I
Paul
think that
run.
he got disillusioned.
Oh, go ahead.
I think he got. Oh, Rand Paul. Yeah, Rand Paul would be good. But yeah, I don't know, dude. I think that Ron DeSantis theory is really interesting, man. And they clearly don't care. I don't think the right cares about the intersectional shit. So
No.
it's like, yeah, we'll run 2 white guys. We don't give a shit. Like it's,
Yeah.
you know, and most people on the right don't care about that. So,
in fact,
like,
wouldn't that be the perfect kind of symmetry if the 2 old white guys beat Kamala Harris and whatever intersectional woman? Because Kamala Harris would like. Okay, let's theorize about this. Who would Kamala Harris pick as her VP? Because I think it's going to be a woman. And
you think it'd be a woman, not someone like Pete Buttigieg or some shit?
Well, okay, so
a woman of color and a gay dude, like that's like the ultimate. Although they did say he wasn't gay enough. They said that because he didn't walk around in assless chaps, then he wasn't politically gay or whatever.
It could certainly be Buttigieg, but like from what I've heard, basically her entire staff are like women. And I think that they would like the symbolism of like the all woman like president and VP and all this stuff. And I don't know.
think they do that. Democrat dudes would not show up for that.
I don't think that matters. I think that
at the end of the day, they still want to win, and I think that they know that is.
But if the alternative is Trump and DeSantis,
I still think
that they think that their base isn't going to plug their nose and vote for Kamala Harris. Okay, well let's leave it back up. Let's not even think about the campaign. Like because if she gets elevated to the presidency, she gets to choose her VP. It's not like Nancy Pelosi just gets elevated to the role. Who do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be Buttigieg?
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's going to be a woman. I don't know what dude it would be, but I don't think it's going to be a woman. I'm just like, whatever reasons that they in the plus column from why they think that might be a good idea. I'm just telling you that that most dudes are not going to be like, okay, double, no chance of of a woman, or no chance of a guy even being part of that decision. Like, I think one of the things that makes.
Did you see Gavin Newsom's speech the other day where he was like, women are the best. They're much better at politics than men. He did this whole thing about how great women are. And it was like,
but I heard Kamala Harris was campaigning for him or something. It's like, how's that going to work out for you?
If you watch this thing, you have to watch it with the sound off first, just to see how extreme Gavin Newsom's mannerisms are and how much he looks like a used car salesman. Because it's like so much better with the sound off. He looks exactly like a used car salesman. Then you turn it on, he's like, women are so much better at politics than men.
So let's make some predictions here then.
All right.
So if I'm not mistaken, I believe within the next week or two, we have the recall of Newsom and the prime minister election in Canada.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Both of those are within the next, I think one of them is the 11th or 12th. I can't remember when, but I know that both of them are within the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is going to happen in either of those?
I don't have as much insight into Canada. I really hope Trudeau loses, though, man. Trudeau deserves to lose. Canada is insane. Canada is probably like second most insane to Australia right now. Well, maybe not.
Claire Lehman's tweets about how Americans don't know what they're talking about. Man, you want to talk about someone who I like. I really used to like Claire a lot, and she still does have some really good observations, but she's kind of like Sam Harris in a lot of ways, and that just so completely off the reservation in some of these other things that it's like, I just can't, man. Like, what are you even talking about?
I just want to say that I feel like I identified that Claire was a psycho early on, and I'm very thrilled to be blocked by her on Twitter. I was blocked by her for defending James Lindsay's honor. I basically, like, after she went after Lindsay that like one of the times, and she was like really denouncing him for something, I basically I tweeted something like, if Claire Lehman ever gets James Lindsay booted off this site, I will come after her with the fury of 1,000 suns to defend his honor. And she blocked me over that.
Over that?
I was like, Claire, you know it's true. You know you're going to try to get Lindsay banned. And because she was denouncing him like hardcore. Anyway, I feel like I identified Claire Lehman as a psycho early on, and I was right.
I won't say she's a psycho. I don't want to do that. I just think that she's someone who has some really bad ideas. But anyway.
Maybe I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but she's not my favorite person in the world. And, you know.
Yep.
Canada. She made me agree with Tim Pool yesterday too, Truman. Where she told Tim Pool off on Twitter, and I was like, goddamn, Claire Lehman is simultaneously both right and wrong. She wrote a 4-word tweet that was like, I think all she said was like, you're such a tool. And I was like, she's correct, but she's also not correct in this context because Tim Pool is absolutely right. And she's making me agree with Tim Pool.
I don't have any personal beef with Tim Pool, but it is still a funny situation. But what you were saying about Canada, that yeah, they're getting as bad as Australia. I mean, that was the Australia thing is mind blowing to me. By the way, that was a few of my Facebook post experiments were about. I was like, conservative. One of them I forgot. One of my posts was literally about. I called the human immune system a conspiracy theory, and a conservative right-wing conspiracy theory, and that if you think that there's some magical antibodies that you get from recovering from COVID-19, then you need to wake up and join the rest of the world in reality, and that the only way you could get any type of antibody protection was from getting vaccinated. Like they were so bad shit, Carlin. I'm serious. Anyway, but Canada, I mean, it was oh my gosh, Quebec, not Quebec. It was another one, maybe British Columbia. I don't know. It's all the same. I know it wasn't Saskatchewan. How about that? But they had it where the police could pull you over randomly just to ask you why you were out, during the lockdowns and stuff. But okay, so you don't know if Trudeau will win. And by the way, my feelings on those are, it's like, I said this during the 2020 election, and that's how I feel now. I'm like, if you want to vote for these lunatics, you're gonna get what you deserve and get it good and hard. It's just that whenever I feel the brunt of that. Like, I don't live in Portland, so I don't have to worry about the consequences of being under Ted Wheeler.
Yeah.
Right. But I am under Joe Biden right now. I didn't vote for this shit. Like, they're pissing in my pool now. Okay. So you're not really calibrated to Canada. That's fine. I don't really have a pulse on it either. I'm just following it. I want to know, but because it's not a coincidence that Brexit and Trump happen around the same time.
Right.
So there is a connectivity here, but okay. So Newsom in California.
I think Newsom's going to win. I do. I've been saying for weeks now, I think Newsom's going to win because I think they're going to cheat. And that's just like my suspicion. I've heard way too much about shenanigans going on in California. I also think the Republicans are screwing themselves yet again, because I keep hearing that they're not spending any money in California in terms of like the GOP. I'm not saying Larry Elder isn't, and like the people running, because obviously like he's doing fundraising, he's doing his own thing.
Sure.
But I have heard repeatedly that the GOP is not spending any money in California because they're putting it all towards 2022 because they feel so overconfident. They feel so overconfident that this is just like a foregone conclusion.
They think Elder's going to win, so they're not worried about it.
Yeah, they're not worried about it. And they convinced him to run. The GOP specifically asked Larry Elder to run because they didn't feel like they had any other candidates. And I think they would have been smart to support Caitlyn Jenner. That was stupid, or at least
it seemed like Caitlyn Jenner didn't want to do it, actually. So I mean, who knows?
Who knows? I think in terms of like red pilling people, it would have been. I think in terms of the culture war, Caitlyn Jenner would absolutely have been the smartest dang play they could have ever made, because it would have broken everyone's brain. It would have woken so many people up to how
they would have been able to handle it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had like Donald Trump and like any prominent conservative person out there saying, vote for Caitlyn Jenner, get Caitlyn Jenner in there for governor, the left wouldn't know how to handle it.
Exactly.
They wouldn't, like you said, it would break their brains.
But the GOP doesn't think like that. And so they have Larry Elder. Larry Elder seems to be doing really well, but I think Gavin Newsom's going to win. I do.
I think he's going to win. And I think you're right, because it's like the thing is what I've heard a lot of conservatives say is that no one's going to show up. No one's going to show up to vote for Gavin Newsom. That's true. But ballot harvesting is legal in California.
They don't have to.
So they don't have to show up. And the fact that I haven't really been listening to any conservative media lately. I have some off and on about the Afghanistan stuff, but like, I just don't listen to Ben Shapiro anymore or anything like that. Like I do, if there's a story that it's like, I kind of want to know what the mainstream conservative take is going to be on this. So maybe they have talked about this, but like, the little bit that I have seen, because I still follow him on Twitter, a little bit that I have seen any of like those types of people talk about is that it's that they'll use that wording. No one's going to show up for Gavin Newsom. And it's like, you know, that they don't have to.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, I don't think, now I could be wrong, but ballot harvesting is in all elections, right? It's not just like presidential ones. They can do it in all of them, right?
They found like 300 ballots in this one guy's car.
For this one, for this upcoming one?
For California. Yeah.
Wasn't there one where there was women that were pulling ballots out of that got caught on yeah. And so I think it was Kevin, engineering politics. Kevin, he told me that what they found was that the way they had the envelope formatted was that you could see through it to see who they voted for on the envelope. So you could just conveniently lose that on like, and I don't know. I mean, I said, dude, is that still the case? Did they push back on it? He's like, I don't know. So I don't know what happened with that.
They have this thing where you can print your ballot from home. And they claim that there's like it's like an individualized thing. I don't believe it for one red flip. You can print your ballot at home. And one of the conditions, Truman, one of the conditions you have to meet in order to print your ballot at home is having been impacted by COVID-19. If you have been impacted by COVID-19 in the state of California, you can print your ballot at home. They're going to cheat. There is no way that they are not going to cheat. And I think that the GOP, again, they haven't done a dang thing because they learned nothing. They learned nothing from the election. Have they filed any election integrity challenges at all? Because one of the things that we learned from the election is that they needed to file the challenges before for them to have any hope of being heard anywhere. Because when they filed the challenges afterwards, and I think the Supreme Court made a stupid decision when Texas and all like 20 other states sued all of the other states. That was a bad decision by the Supreme Court. But the rest of the states, they should have filed before the election. Have the GOP done a dang thing in California? No.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just like, and it's like so predictable. This is like, never underestimate the GOP's ability to screw things up because they don't take it seriously and they don't learn. You know, I had a friend of mine, he made this analogy to me. I was talking to him about, you know, kind of like all this stuff. And he's like, Carlin, the GOP, the Republicans, they're like dogs. They exist in the present moment. All they can handle is the present moment. They can't go back. They can't see long term. All they can do is react to what is going on in the present moment. And that's really all you should expect of them because they are not capable of doing this long term. Like they are not capable of playing chess. They're at very best playing checkers.
Yep. Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, because that's a statement about what we would maybe call American conservative governance. Generally, that's the thing that it talked about where it's like they'll compromise at 5 when the left wants 10 and then the next iteration is compromise at 10, you know, when the left wants 15. And so, yeah, the whole progressivism driving the speed limit, because that's what ends up happening if you only live in the now. You're like, well, yeah, we'll compromise here. Like the way they did on this fucking infrastructure bill, $3.5 trillion. After all the other spending, have you seen the shit that's in that thing?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah,
it's like, no, be obstructionist. Be obstructionist. Don't agree to any of it. I think honestly though, I think this is where there's an asymmetry between psychos and non-psychos, is that like they knew that if they didn't agree on some part of it, then the Democrats were going to shove it through with budget reconciliation, which is of course crazy horseshit. And they knew that they would have no say in it whatsoever. The Democrats would just force through whatever insanity they want. I think that was the calculus, but I still think you have to fight it and force them to do the crazy thing.
Right.
I do. I
agree. They should be putting up. I mean, and where have they been on any of the tech censorship stuff? I mean, to be honest, because they were all talking a big game about this before the election, and I understand the GOP doesn't have power right now, but they could at least make a statement. They could at least try. They could do something.
Have you read Woke Inc. by Vivek Ramaswamy?
I've read parts of it. Yeah, I got an advanced copy of it at some point.
It's really good. It's really good. He has a whole section on tech censorship and stuff on Facebook and Twitter and stuff. It's a fantastic book. But he talks about what made me think of it is he talks about them like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg being brought before Congress to just blow smoke up people's asses and, you know, and nothing happens and it's all ridiculous. And Anyway, all right, man. What do you want? How do you want to end it? What do you
I
think?
guess, I mean, maybe kind of like a current status check. Where are we now on a scale of like doom and gloom to like everything is great? And does that
That's
sound like
good.
a good ending?
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. You want to go
Okay.
first? You want me to?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So let's treat it like 1 is doom and gloom and 10 everything is great.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I'm about a 5 right now.
I was like, I think she's gonna say 5.
Because like listen, there is an entertainment value to all of this that I just can't deny.
Okay.
And it's like, and in some respects, because I guess I'm probably because I spend so much time at my house now, I like never even leave my house anymore. I feel like I'm watching the world implode on TV, and maybe it's like a movie, and the crazy like mastermind Trump is about to come in and run for president again, and that's going to be like thoroughly entertaining. So I have an appreciation for that. But on the other hand, I honestly like I feel like things are going to get a lot worse. I think they're going to get worse, and I think it's going to get bad, and I think people are going to get very angry, and that's not good. And I think that particularly for people who are in the cities, it's going to get bad. I think you and I are going to be fine. Like you're in Wyoming, I'm in New Hampshire. Like we are going to be fine. Like the bear, like at least we can retreat back to our your conservative, my kind of like libertarian, like free state, and but I think
Yeah,
for
I live in the
people,
mountains. I'm not worried
yeah,
about Antifa. I'm
no.
just not.
No, and I'm not worried about it either. But like, I think that we're pretty insulated, but I think people are in the cities are going to have a really hard time of it. And I hope that at some point, I do think that it is fertile ground to start waking people up to what's going on. But at the same time, Trump running for president again is going to send everyone back to their collective corners, and it's just going to start, it's going to be like 2020 for the next 2 years, probably even amped up urgency on like the left side because they know they're screwing up so badly. So I don't know, it's probably going to be a day-to-day thing. Some days are going to be good, some days are going to be bad, but I'm going to try to find as much humor as I can in the situation.
How many more votes did Trump gain between 2016 and 2020?
Like 10 million or something.
Yeah, I think that if he ran again, there's also that factor of the people who are going to go. I think I had previously held the belief that anyone who still is not like awake on this stuff probably won't be. And I think my paradigm was wrong. My paradigm was anyone who doesn't see everything that people like you and I see, when that's not the requirement. The requirement is, do you see enough to realize what matters in that moment,
Right.
And so anyway, so that was just my thought based on what you said about him running. Because in other words, I don't think everyone will run back to their respective corners if he runs again. I think that there will be a lot of Democrats who will look at 2016 to 2020 and 2020 to 2024 and go, yep, that sucks. That was really bad. I remember being upset a lot during Trump's presidency, but I don't remember being monetarily impacted, and I'm now on my 9th booster shot and I'm still having to wear a mask. And I'm,
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, and I think those people are going to go, there's something not working here.
That's a really good point, and we didn't really talk about that. I think the more booster shots that people are required, like I've already seen like the initial booster coming out, and I've asked some of my friends that maybe are like on the left or maybe curious, I guess. I've been like, are you getting that booster shot? They're like, no.
Yeah, no. Like, I got 2.
Yeah.
I'm not getting this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is official, but there are people saying that in Israel that they were considering the people who didn't have the booster shot unvaccinated.
Yes, but it's like an extra booster shot now. Israel, I think, is on 4.
I don't know if that's true.
I could be wrong. It's definitely the 3rd they're considering unvaccinated. But did you also hear that Pfizer is apparently like experimenting working on a pill that you have to take twice a day?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like
come on.
Pfizer Mectin. That was what James Lindsay called it. He's like the super duper patented Pfizer Mectin. Like, okay. So yeah, I think that I had thought that we had reached such a saturation point of red pill moments that the odds of there being anyone left capable of being red pilled were really low. I think I even mentioned it in a previous conversation where I said I thought it was less than 5% of the population. I think I'm wrong about that. I would amend that to a higher number. I don't know what it is, but I would say that there are a significant amount of people that are capable of being sufficiently disillusioned with this to hold their nose and vote for Trump, because they'll be like, okay, how did we go from energy independent, peace in the Middle East, largely, and coming and moving out of the COVID stuff to all of this crazy shit, to literally the opposite, in 9 months. So anyway, but to the initial like check-in thing, I think I'm probably at maybe a 4 or a 3. And that's going to sound bad, but people need to understand that I've been basically at a 0 for the last
an improvement.
For the last the last, I don't know, 10 months. So exactly. It's an improvement. A big one. So I think part of it, man, I mean, I'm still just mentally catching up I was in Montana for almost 3 weeks, working like an average of 14 to 16 hours a day whenever I was there. And so I think I'm still just mentally fried. So I'm just trying to catch up on where things are at. But I do think that the best way I could describe it, because I was thinking about this yesterday, I'm just like, how do I feel right now? Like, let's do a little checkup, even just for myself. But I think I'm in a bit of a holding pattern in terms of like, I'm going to withhold or try my best to keep from drawing any more conclusions. Cause I really try to revise. I mean, I just made a revision right there of like, okay, actually, I think more people are capable of waking up to this. I'm going to withhold my judgment about how bad things are right now in terms of their ability to either get worse or get better. I'm going to wait until I think around Christmas. The thing that I've landed on is we need to see what the first semester is like. We need to see some of the in terms of like, I'm really, basketball season is the big one I'm waiting for, because you can make, like, I can see why some of these places aren't mandating masks for outdoor during football or track, anything like that. Like some places have a fall track season, but when basketball happens, I'm really curious if schools are going to require masks for parents during basketball games. So that's one of my big, like, hypothesis things, or like, I don't know if hypothesis is the right word, but like the thing I'm going to be looking at to help calibrate where we're at, because I think that that's going to be a big tension thing. Also, that's when we're getting into, there's going to be like, right now we're not really in the sports where there's a lot of like transgender stuff.
Right.
But I think in the fall we'll get more of that. Well, I guess track is one. But anyway, I want to wait until like maybe after Christmas, because I want one semester. I want to give some of these like challenges to vaccine mandates time to make it through the legal system. Like the religious exemptions one, like there's some states that aren't even allowing, or some companies aren't even allowing religious exemption things for people. And so those are being challenged. So I'm going to give those some time. And I really am looking to see, because again, what happens is that people go home for the holidays and then they interact with and I think that we can get a good sense at where things are at, usually at or around like Thanksgiving, Christmas time. But I want to wait until after the first semester is done, because that also is when schools will have a good chance to reset or change some of their policies on stuff. And so I think my point is that I'm at a 3 or a 4, but I could see myself at a 6 after Christmas, in January, if I see people backing down on some of this crazy shit, if I see some good legal wins. But does that make sense? There's just some things I'm waiting for to help shape my opinion.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think like ultimately the reality is kind of like, oh God, I had it and it slipped out of my head for a bit. It slipped out of my head. Dang.
Basketball, sports, 3 or 4, could be 6, Christmas, Thanksgiving,
I don't
masks,
know.
sports, transgender.
Well, I don't know. Well, I think, what I was
Brian
thinking about.
Stelter, potatoes.
No. Maybe it'll come back. But I guess what I was thinking about when you were, speaking is it's kind of like we're in a little bit of a holding pattern right now where it's like, we can't control any of this stuff. And
That's exactly right.
I honestly think like that's like the biggest kind of white pill to take away from all this. Like that, average people have to know that like, we're not in control of any of this right now. We're really not and so it's kind of like, just have to sit back and watch what happens.
Well, we can't influence it though. I made a post on my locals today about how every little thing does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to find ways to actively be trying to resist this stuff. But yeah, you're right. Largely, especially on the policy realm, like your point is correct. Like we can't do anything there. And so we have to watch it. The other thing that I was going to say, that I'm waiting for is, someone told me that there is going to be change it. Like a lot of people were hiding behind OSHA for some of this vaccine stuff.
Yes.
And that, after Pfizer got approved, that OSHA is going to be changing their policies. And so that OSHA is not going to be it's not going to be a bulwark against revealing whether you're vaccinated or not and labeling people as such. So, and that's the other part is that, I want to see if schools start mandating it for kids, doing vaccine mandates for students, because they have that. Like whenever we took our daughter in to get some vaccines, because not anti-vaccine, just got some questions about the COVID one. I was asking the nurse what she was getting, because I always say, like, what are you wanting to give her? What are these things, And almost always I say, yeah, go for it. There's been a few that were like basically boosters, that it's like, if she's in the 4% of people that get this thing and there's only 4% of them that have a problem, like 4% of the 4%, that's what this is for. And I'm like, okay, no. But like most of the ones they recommend we've gotten. Right. But anyway, one of the ones I was asking them is she was like, well, she's going to need it for when she goes to kindergarten. And I said, okay, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But in my mind, I'm like, well, she's going to be homeschooled, so I'm not really worried about that. Yeah. But my point is that we have those. So I'm also, I want to see what the first school district is, and I'll add it to my, Venn diagram, example that I give of how it's, the places that have drag queen story hour and aren't fighting CRT in schools and do have masks on 4-year-olds and do have, mask and vaccine mandates. That Venn diagram's a circle. Right. I think one thing you could add to it is places that are mandating COVID vaccines for students. So I'm waiting to see for that. So OSHA, and those are the other two things that I'm waiting to see.
Well, so what I was going to say came back to me, which is the reality is that like human beings can only be pushed so far before they say no. And I think the big question in my mind is like, how far is that?
What's the breaking point?
What is the breaking point? Yep. I mean, and we're seeing like in other countries, they're having their breaking point. Like France has been having massive protests, like something is going on there. I don't know why we're not seeing the same thing here. Maybe it's because, like we're not seeing the same thing here because in the red states where you might have like the highest critical mass for these protests, things are pretty much okay.
So they don't have anything to protest, and they don't cover the things that happen. Perfect example, a friend of mine, I think I might have even told you about this in the last one. I don't think so. I don't know if it happened yet. It had. He lives in San Francisco. His union didn't support, and he's a nurse, and his union didn't support them protesting the vaccine mandates for the people, because he's an ER nurse. And they put it on Facebook. People that weren't even part of it, people that didn't even work at the hospital, showed up and were protesting against it. So these things just aren't getting covered. Also, like in the places where they are doing it, it's not getting covered. Like the stuff in France isn't getting covered here.
No, not at all. Again, you only know about it because we're on Twitter.
Yep.
Because we have to be on Twitter. It's where the world revolves around. But I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen. But anything else for this episode?
No, this is good. It was fun catching up. That was that was good.
I think that's a good place to end it. So you guys can find me, Carlin, at kb.locals.com, Carlin Borisenko on YouTube, Dr. Carlin B on Twitter, all the other places. Truman, where can people find you?
They can find me on YouTube, Return to Reason, Locals, Return to Reason, returntoreason.locals.com, and Twitter at My Mundane Mind. Can I add one thing? Can I do one optimistic thing that I just thought of?
Good.
Because what I almost said was you can find me in the movie theater, because I'm stoked that movies are back, man. Like
Are
There's
they
a
back?
bunch of
I don't even know.
oh yeah. There's a bunch of movies that are coming out this fall. So the other thing is that now that movies are back, like so Shang-Chi just came out, the new Marvel movie. What I don't see is people writing things about how dangerous the movie theaters are. What I am seeing is people talking about how great this movie is.
Really?
So yeah, so I'm excited to watch a movie. I'm a huge movie guy. Whenever Movie Pass came out, I watched probably 3 movies a week. Like I'll watch movies by myself. I don't care. I love movies. And so I'm pumped that movies are back. And I think that's another, because you're talking about like breaking points and stuff. I think one of people's big breaking points is their wallet, and Hollywood is like, we're putting these movies out. And a lot of the movies are like, they're not going to do the streaming thing like they did with Wonder Woman or with Black Widow. They're exclusively in theaters. So the Venom sequel is coming out next month. Shang-Chi just came out. The Eternals is coming out. Spider-Man No Way Home. There's the Ghostbusters sequel that actually looks really good. It's coming out. Dune. There's a bunch of fucking awesome movies that are coming out. And I think that people, even in these crazy like blue strongholds, people are going to go to those movies, and that will hopefully be another thing where it's like, okay, they're seeing I'm being required to do all this, or my kids being required to do all this. There's some inconsistencies here. I'm comfortable going to a movie, you know? And so I don't know. I'm just excited for them personally, but I'm also excited for movies are a thing that unifies us in a lot of ways. Like when there's a good movie, it's a good movie, you know, you can talk about it with people. So that's one of my white pill things, is that movies are back. And I know it's a stupid, like cheesy thing, but I love movies. And so I'm just excited that they're back.
It's not stupid at all. Like one of the things in this whole pandemic that has driven me crazy is like no new content.
Right.
Ever.
Right?
And it's like, you know, have I seen every movie that's ever made? No. But still, like I wanted new movies, and especially like flying around on airplanes, like you had like the entertainment thing at your seat. They've had the same movies for like a year and a half.
Yep.
Like you just run out of things to watch. So no, I think that's a great way to end it. Like good white pill moment. I don't know that I actually want to see any of the movies that you mentioned, but I don't even care.
Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters sequel.
I don't know, man. Like I don't know. I've been so disappointed with all these things, like all these like remakes and sequels and all these things. I feel like the level of disappointment is like very high.
No, this will then you'll go in with low standards and you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Wow.
I think this one's going to be good. I think they're going to nail it.
My husband will probably want to go, so I will go because
You're not a Marvel person. You don't like the Marvel.
I like some Marvel movies. Like I would really be excited about. Like, are they ever going to make what is the one that I really like? Doctor Strange. Is that it?
Is a guy, and they've already made that movie.
But isn't there supposed to be a sequel?
Yeah, that's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness comes out. I think it's next year. It's 2020.
I'll be excited for that movie. That was my favorite Marvel movie. Was Doctor Strange
with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. No, I
just like the story. I like the story.
The story is fun. It's a fun movie. But anyway, I'll I know there's maybe that puts me at a 4 or 5 just because I'm excited the movie.
You're like, it's like for people listening to the audio, like Truman is like beaming right now. He looks like a little kid that's like in a candy store. He's so excited.
I love movies, dude. These movies like Venom 2, that got delayed a year. Ghostbusters, I can tell you the dates of when these movies. Venom was supposed to come out last October. It's coming out this October. Ghostbusters Afterlife was supposed to come out, I believe, in May or March, and it got pushed back to now. The Morbius movie got pushed back by it was supposed to be March of 2020. So it's gonna be March of 2022. So that's like 2 years. Like maybe it was 2021. Yeah, but the Bond movie, all of these, man, I've been stoked for these movies. So like, yeah, I'm excited because these are movies I got pumped for 2 years ago that I thought I was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. That movie looks amazing. I think we're gonna get a new trailer for that in October.
That I would be excited about. I'm excited about the movie about like Princess Diana. I like that type of movie.
Oh yeah, it's isn't Kristen Stewart playing her?
Kristen Stewart's playing her.
She looks crazy like her in the trailer.
Yeah,
not in the trailer.
Like
I don't know if there's a trailer in there
is. Yeah. Oh, and actually, I amend my statement. Downton Abbey 2 is coming out.
Isn't that a TV show? They
made a movie about it, and now a sequel to the movie is coming out, so it continues the Downton Abbey story.
I never watched that. My dad loved it. That's BBC thing, not really.
My husband pretended not to watch it and not to like it. So here's what happened when the original Downton Abbey movie came out. It was like I had made Victor watch the entire series with me, because like every Sunday night I'd be sit down like, Victor, we're watching Downton Abbey, like shut off whatever you're doing, we're watching Downton Abbey. And he would like sit there looking miserable the whole time. And then when the movie came out, I said to him, I was like, so the Downton Abbey movie's coming out, I want to go, do you want to go with me? And he like pretends, he's like, well, I guess we can go together. I'm like, you love Downton Abbey. He's like, no, I don't, but we can go together.
That's hilarious. I love that whenever people like, I feel like I had an example of that with my wife, where there was a movie or TV show that she wanted to watch together. And I was like, I acted like I didn't like it. I can't remember. I feel like but that always happens, right? Where guys are like, fine, and then they're actually like, I know dudes that watch This Is Us with their wives, and they'll watch it even when she doesn't. I'm like, you like that show, man? Get out of here.
It's okay to admit that you like it. It's all right. It's not an aversion to your masculinity.
Exactly.
You're proving you're not a toxic man. Is what's going on.
Yeah, or you're just a cuddlefish, like Douglas Murray writes
Indeed.
about. All right, guys. All right,
that's a good way to end it. And we'll see you guys. And we do these every couple of weeks. So we will see you guys again in a couple of weeks. Have a good one.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Peace.